Welcome to Immigration Conference 2022, hosted by Mansouri Immigration Firm in collaboration with Siava Ideas Accelerated.
A message from the Mayor. On behalf of my colleagues on Vancouver City Council and the citizens of Vancouver, I am pleased to welcome the participants of the first annual 2022 Immigration Conference. As Mayor, I am proud that the City of Vancouver is home to a diverse and multicultural population. Vancouver is a destination city for so many new immigrants, many of whom contribute so vibrantly to the culture and economics of the city. There are many educational, cultural, and recreational activities to complement the restaurants, shopping, and entertainment opportunities in our multicultural city. I am confident all those attending the conference will gain a renewed sense of achievement in past accomplishments and an optimistic view of the future. Best wishes for a successful symposium. Sincerely, Mayor Kennedy Stewart. Thank you very much for attending.
To open the conference formally, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Carrie Lynn Barkley, representing Mansouri Immigration Firm.
All right, thank you for the introduction, and good morning to everyone on the day of the Great Rogers outage. So, fortunately, I had my notes already open. A little bit of background about Mansouri Immigration Firm. The firm initially started in 2014 in Ottawa and subsequently moved the main office to Vancouver BC in 2016. We are a boutique immigration firm offering a wide variety of immigration services. We have dealt with extremely complex cases, including different inadmissibility cases, as well as various appeals. So from all of the branches at the Immigration and Refugee Board to procedural fairness complications at the federal court, and as is appropriate for the subject matter this morning, we also handle significant business class applications. Our practitioners are all licensed by the Law Society of Ontario and the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. Our firm is built on an ethical and professional practice. We make client relationships a priority while upholding the strict rules of our professions and following immigration legislation and regulations. We offer a service that includes absolute transparency and honesty through the immigration process. Today, we are proud to say that more than 80% of our clients come from referrals. Over the years, we've maintained our commitment to community support and paid special attention to pro bono cases, as well as the education of students and newly licensed practitioners, together with positive involvement with the regulatory bodies. We offer a wide range of business-related immigration services, and we will be covering a few of those pathways in today's presentation. Now, before I start talking about those, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background for Canadian immigration. So, immigrants contribute to our economy, and the strength of Canada's economy is measured in part by the number of people working. So that's known as our labor force, and our labor force pays taxes and funds our public services, like our famous healthcare system. Thanks to immigration, Canada's labor force continues to grow by a small amount every year. If it weren't for immigration, employers would have trouble finding qualified workers. Canadians are living longer and having fewer children. So more people are retiring, there are fewer students in our schools. As a result, the pool of Canadian-born existing and potential workers is limited in Canada. So immigrants contribute to the economy not only by filling gaps in the labor force and paying taxes, but also by spending money on goods, housing, and transportation. Employers are already having trouble finding Canadian-born workers to fill the jobs. There are work shortages all over the country. More than 6 in 10 immigrants have been selected for their positive economic impact on our economy. Immigrant entrepreneurs specifically create jobs and attract investment to Canada, and they drive innovation. Most of our immigrants have excellent science, technology, engineering, and math skills, and they make up about half of all STEM degree holders in Canada. These skills are extremely important in our knowledge economy. For immigrants to find work here, it is important to make sure their education, training, and experience meet Canadian job standards. The most recent report from the Minister for Immigration makes a number of comments about immigration over the past few years during these unprecedented times. Canada's permanent and temporary residents supported Canada's resilience during the pandemic, particularly through their work in long-term care, health care, the food sector, and other frontline services. Temporary foreign workers contributed significantly to our agriculture and crop production sectors over the course of the pandemic. The future of Canada lies with its immigration programs. Just to give you a sense, immigrants make up a significant and increasing share of our population. 4 in 10 people that currently reside in Canada are either immigrants or children of immigrants. Immigration has become the primary source of population growth in Canada in recent decades, driving more than 80% of our population growth. Without immigration, our population will decline in about 10 years, and it will not recover without immigration. Immigration also contributes to our labor force. Just over 1/4 of our working age population, so those aged 24 to 54, are immigrants. Immigration will be essential to the growth of the working age population. Our working age population is also projected to decrease over the next 20 years, and without immigration, it will not increase again. Temporary and permanent residents are able to meet specific labor market needs. In some industrial sectors, relatively high proportions of the workforce are immigrants and temporary residents. Permanent residents who become entrepreneurs create jobs, attracting investment to Canada, driving innovation. Demographic changes in Canada during the pandemic highlighted the importance of immigration. Over the past 5 years, immigration has accounted for 3/4 of our total population growth here. That figure dropped to 58% in 2020 because of border closures and other impacts. So as of January 2021, Canada's population was over 38 million, but it had only increased by 0.1% from the previous quarter. This is the lowest annual growth in numbers since 1945, and it is the lowest percentage of growth since 1916, both of which followed wars. So we are now at a wartime level of population growth in Canada, which is not a good thing. We also hit a record high number of deaths in Canada during the pandemic. We lost 300,000 people. Birth rates remained at 1.47, which is lower than the replacement rate required. So what do we then do about this? The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly highlighted the importance of immigration to Canada. The economic immigration class is the largest source of permanent resident admissions to Canada, approximately 58%. In 2020, the number of individuals admitted to Canada under the economic class was over 100,000. This was a decrease of 46% from 2019. So these levels have to come back up, which speaks to the importance of the business immigration programs. So one of the key elements of our, there we are. One of the key elements of this is the labor market impact assessment. Labor market impact assessments are essential when a foreign national is applying for a work permit for the purposes of managing their Canadian business. An applicant has to demonstrate that their presence in Canada as the owner of their own venture will not have a negative impact on the local labor market. Proper advertising of job opportunities, ethical recruitment practices, and adherence to regulatory requirements are essential to obtaining the positive LMIA. The applicant has to show their presence will result in the creation of new job opportunities for Canadians. I think if we go backwards, we get to the IMP. The International Mobility Program covers some situations for which an applicant doesn't need to obtain a labor market impact assessment. The government won't expect the Canadian employer to go through the recruiting process. Different trade agreements and workforce treaties with various countries, as well as humanitarian causes, are among these classes. So there are 2 very popular ones that cover a situation where a new business wants to offer a managerial or specialty position to a manager. The first is the C11 work permit category. This category is designed for self-employed persons and entrepreneurs who want to come here to run their own business. They must hold ownership and control of the business to qualify. Many of these applicants also have parallel applications for permanent residency, and we'll get to those in a minute. Circumstances create what is called a dual intent situation from an immigration perspective. So they're coming as a temporary resident, but they intend to eventually apply for permanent residence. That is fine. That is acceptable under our immigration law. What's key is that they show a willingness to do whatever their permit suggests. So if it's over, they have to return home, and if they obtain permanent residence, they don't. So the C11 process, they look at whether or not the person coming on a temporary basis to operate their own business is going to generate economic, social, or cultural benefits or opportunities for Canadians or permanent residents. Benefits to Canadian clients as well can also be considered in the case, especially if there's a unique service being offered. So factors in significant benefit: is the work going to create a viable business that will benefit Canadian or permanent resident workers or provide economic stimulus? Does the applicant have a particular background or skills that will improve the viability of the business? Is there a business plan that shows key steps in the process? Have they taken steps to activate their business plan? Indicators of a significant benefit will include job creation, also development in regional or remote settings, or expansion of export markets for Canadian products and services. Advancement of Canadian industry, like technological development, is also really important. The degree of ownership, the issuance of work permits for entrepreneurs are going to be considered when the applicant has a controlling interest in the business. Next is the C12 process. C12 is a situation where the proposed business is an affiliate or subsidiary of a foreign business that already exists, and they want to send one of their managers here or skilled staff to temporarily work in the Canadian business. This is where the intra-company transfer is a good idea. The applicant has to currently be employed or work in a parent subsidiary branch or affiliate of the enterprise that initially employs them. They have to be transferring to one that has a qualifying relationship. So they have to actually have relationships to each other, the foreign company and the Canadian company. The individual should be transferring to an executive, senior managerial, or specialized knowledge role. So that's an important key as well for the C12 process. Next, we have entrepreneurship and permanent residence. The provincial nominee programs, which is PNP for short. Permanent residency through entrepreneurship, the federal government has assigned the due diligence and screening process to the provinces and territories themselves. So each province and territory has their own unique screening process, and they decide who they will be admitting to their province based on their local needs. So once the provincial nominee program is satisfied with the applicant and their business plan, they support the applicant to obtain a temporary work permit, which enables them to come to Canada and start their business with their families. The program is for workers who have skills, education, and work experience to contribute to the economy in a specific province or territory. They have to want to live in that province and become permanent residents of Canada. Now, each province has its own streams, so their own immigration programs that target certain groups. In a program stream, provinces and territories may target students, business people, skilled or semi-skilled workers, depending on the needs of that province. How an individual applies depends on the application process in that province. And this is where it's really key to have professional immigration advice before you undertake applying to one of these programs. So using British Columbia's PNP programs as an example. BC has a critical need for healthcare workers and early childhood educators. So they have priority access to those jobs when people apply. You get a better chance at assessment under the eligibility criteria. In addition to healthcare, BC is also looking for technology workers. So they are looking for the ability to recruit and retain international talent in tech occupations when they don't have local workers. Over the time since its inception in 2017, BC's PNP has supported 6,000 tech workers to be nominated for permanent residence here. So the key features are that you need to qualify under each province's program in order to apply. So there's a two-stage. You apply in the province and then you apply federally to enter Canada. So the startup visa is the next one. This is a very popular program and it has a very, very good reputation because of its success. So the goal of this program is to invite people who have an innovative business that is going to contribute to our economy. and they can apply for immigration to Canada after getting support from one designated entity. A designated entity, and you'll hear from a few of them today, are in charge of verifying funds and supporting the business through the process. Designated entities include venture capitalists, angel investors, and business incubators. Several of the minister's annual reports to Canadian Parliament, which are made every year, show that many highly successful businesses have been among these startups. So these new businesses are sort of on the cutting edge of what keeps Canada on a global stage. Now, to qualify, you have to have a qualifying business. So the applicants have to own 10% or more of the voting rights attached to all shares, and I'll talk about shares in a minute. At the time the individual receives their permanent residence, they have to be providing active and ongoing management of this business. That has to be the point of them immigrating. An essential part of the operations of the business has to happen in Canada. The business must be incorporated in Canada, not necessarily federally, but incorporated in Canada. A letter of support is required from one of these designated entities, and they'll tell you more themselves about how one goes about that process. The process to pitch your idea is different for each organization, and each organization has its own individual requirements. After that, applicants have to meet the language requirements, so the ability to work in English or French or both will help your business succeed in Canada. Language tests have to be obtained from an approved agency, and they will evaluate speaking, reading, listening, and writing. And the language requirements are essential. And money. You have to have enough money to settle. The government is not giving financial support to new businesses. It barely gives financial support to Canadians and permanent residents, so that's important. There has to be proof of funds. The individual has to have the money to support themselves. It can't be borrowed from another person, so the applicant has to have the money. The amount that's needed depends on the size of the family, and these amounts are updated every year. All right, so the law, which is my area. Different business structures in Canada. There are 3 business structures common to most provinces and territories, but only one of them is really significant to business immigration, so I'm going to speak very briefly about the other 2. The first and most common is the sole proprietorship, which is a one-owner business. It requires the business owner to be in Canada to set up shop. The owner and the business are one and the same. Sole proprietorship is the easiest to create and the easiest to sell, but it's also the most risky, because you and the business are one and the same. Business gets sued, you get sued, you lose your personal assets. The next common form is partnership, where 2 or more people set up a business together with a view to a profit. They don't actually have to make a profit, they just have to have tried to. That's the point of a partnership. The downside here, again, is unlimited liability. So limited liability partnerships are only available in the professions, and limited partners can easily lose their limited status by taking too much of a role in the management of a partnership. It is an inherently risky thing to do. We call most partnerships firms. They're simply a contractual arrangement by which the parties set out their obligations to each other. The downside is the courts do not care what your arrangement is. They care who you hurt. So you can be responsible for the activities of your fellow partners. They're responsible for anything that happens in the business. Joint ventures are also another type of partnership. It's a contractual arrangement. The purpose of it is it's for a limited purpose. So like ordinary partnerships, a joint venture can be an individual, a corporation, or a partnership. Joint ventures are limited time, so they're usually large construction projects or special events are done jointly by different groups. It's a way of pooling resources amongst organizations so that one individual organization is not footing the whole bill. Now, incorporation, this is the one that is most common for business structures in Canada. Corporations are separate legal entities from shareholders. Corporations are run by people called directors. Directors are chosen by shareholders. Shareholders are technically the owners of the corporation, though not really. It's an ownership interest in the corporation. The corporation is a legal person. Obviously, it doesn't have a brain, so people have to do things for it, but it is considered a person legally, which is a little confusing, but that's just how we do it. We inherited this from England. So Directors and shareholders can be the same people in a small business corporation, and in fact, they often are. It gives owners and the shareholders and directors, if they're the same people, they don't have to worry about conflicts amongst themselves. Corporations are quite expensive to start compared to the other types of business arrangement, but are very flexible in terms of ownership structure. A corporation in BC and Ontario BC or Ontario, doesn't require any percentage of the directors to be resident Canadians. So nobody has to be here when the corporation is set up. It is possible to set it up before you arrive. The important thing to keep in mind is there are ongoing filing requirements. It is really, really important to get advice from a Canadian lawyer before you set up a corporation, because it is easy to disincorporate yourself just by not doing filings on time. So again, legal advice is pretty key. So having said all of this, what happens if your application is rejected? Well, we have a couple options. There are things called appeals and there are things called judicial review. Appeals are available for decisions by a tribunal in the immigration context. So the Immigration and Refugee Board, there are 2 appeal boards within the Immigration and Refugee Board that allow appeals, and some of those can go onward to the federal court. The federal court procedure is called a judicial review. Judicial review is different than an appeal. An appeal is an attempt to alter a previous decision. Judicial review is to assess the fairness of the process. That's the purpose of judicial review. So in most immigration decisions, and all of the decisions made by visa officers, appeals are not permitted. So judicial review is the only route you can take. The judicial review is the court taking a look at the decision of the officer and determining if the officer followed a fair procedure, which means they reviewed the whole submission, they didn't ignore parts of the submission that contradicted their reasoning, or if there was a credibility issue, the applicant was allowed to provide updated submissions. This doesn't mean that every decision you disagree with can be judicially reviewed. It is only where there's an issue with the decision. We prefer to preview the original application before we file if Mansouri Firm did actually do the application. We don't want clients to have unrealistic expectations about their chances. It's not a quick process. It is months before the court makes a decision if there is no settlement offer from Minister's Counsel. And lately there hasn't been a lot of those quickly. Why is the original application important? Well, it has to be as strong as possible. We are restricted to the materials filed on the original application. No new material can be filed on an application for judicial review. So a strong initial application is key to a positive result because that is the evidence I'm looking at to determine if the officer has made an error. You have no protection if you don't use a professional. So your best result is to have an application prepared by a registered Canadian immigration consultant or Canadian lawyer. These applications are too important to try and do them yourself or to try and undertake doing them with someone who is not licensed. So if you use the services of a ghost consultant, and they're called ghost consultants because they don't have a license here, although they may appear to know what they're doing, you have the right to ask for proof of licensure before you obtain services from someone. So it's best, you don't send money until you know for sure that someone is licensed to offer those services in Canada. We have 2 stages to a judicial review application. First is the leave stage. We submit the documents to the court and a judge determines whether or not there's a fairly arguable case. So, sorry, skip ahead here. All right. If the judge believes there is a fairly arguable case, they require immigration to provide all of the documents on file, and then they will schedule a hearing. If the judge does not believe there's a fairly arguable case, they dismiss the application and there is no right of appeal. So again, it is really, really key that the initial application be very, very good in order to ground the judicial review application. The case law is clear that the court will not reweigh the evidence and it will not interfere with an officer's decision unless it is clear they did not consider evidence that they should have. So, what do we do if it's taking too long? Well, there's another application you can make to the federal court when immigration has not made a decision in a reasonable time. The one caveat I have to offer you is that no decisions are made in a reasonable amount of time right now. immigration has ground to a halt for some reason. So they're being very, very difficult. But the reality is Canadian law requires a decision be made when an application is done. So if you've made the application, you are entitled to a decision. There are also 2 stages for this application. The lawyer in charge of the file has to contact immigration to see what the holdup is. If there's no response, or if the response is nonsense, the lawyer then advises that resort will be had to the federal court if a decision is not made. An attempt by an applicant to force a response from immigration doesn't count as one of these inquiries, so it is important that a lawyer be retained to make these, to make the litigation threat, as such as it is. I prefer to be clear with clients that if the initial contacts do not get a response, we are going to court. I'm not going to make an idle threat. If I've threatened immigration with federal court, then we go to federal court. There's no 2 ways about that. So all of this today, and I think that's the end of my slides, should emphasize the importance of a good advisor to help you navigate this whole system. And when you, along with what you hear for the rest of the day, there's no substitute for quality legal advice when you're engaging in an immigration process.
CIAVA IDEA's accelerated organization's mission is to foster entrepreneurship and facilitate localized investment opportunities. CIAVA's team has extensive hands-on experience across PNP and federal business plan immigration programs, providing business plan research and writing services to immigration lawyers and consultants. I would like to ask Mr. Jason Ruberstein to come over here. As I say, it's easier for me to say it in German.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. So as she mentioned, my name is Jason Rubenstein. I am an RCIC, and I'm with CIAVA Ideas Accelerated. So we are a business incubator specializing in planning, researching, and developing businesses for immigration streams. Our expertise in preparing applications, and the business plan submissions for applications for IMP, LMIA owner-operator, PNP entrepreneur, and the SUV program is based in years of earned experience. As you will see, we develop business ideas for immigration around people. By leveraging entrepreneurs' strengths and identifying areas in need of development, we foster growth and entrepreneurial success by providing support through our extensive professional network and slew of resources that new Canadian entrepreneurs would otherwise have difficulty accessing. So today we're going to talk about business concept and business plan writing, feasibility studies, financial projection planning, business consulting, and startup steps. A critical aspect of all Canadian business entrepreneur applications is the initial business idea. This is the seed from which business concepts and business plan submissions are generated. It is these documents that will allow the applicant to come to Canada and be successful in their newly established business. An often overlooked key to success in entrepreneur applications is matching the applicant's experience and education to a gap or need in the Canadian marketplace. This is our strength. By focusing on developing business around people, we differentiate ourselves from other service providers in the market. So just to speak more about business idea development, not sure what happened to that slide. So we analyze each business through the lens of the Canadian marketplace coupled with a targeted immigration stream. We can provide pointed suggestions on how to maximize points allocation for that stream. These analytics go hand in hand with our market-driven data suggestions to improve the appeal of the business for the Canadian market. Following a successful business concept, a conceptual and practical business plan will be prepared to demonstrate the business roadmap. Our business plan writing services emphasize the market demands and are realistic while remaining accurate and relevant to market conditions. When writing effective business plans, input from the entrepreneur is vital. That is why we offer unlimited pre-submission revisions on all of our business concepts and plans. Feasibility studies. Businesses must thoroughly assess the potential risks before embarking on a new project. A feasibility study will help an organization understand the risks and enable them to make calculated decisions. Feasibility studies can determine the viability of the company's plans in terms of competition, potential revenue, and operational impacts. Our feasibility studies are compiled using scientific evidence from specific target markets, industry sectors, and business strategies. Our professional team at CIAVA will support the business by providing a practical financial plan through considering SMART goals. The best way to handle business challenges is to seek expert and professional advice. We aim to provide all companies with essential and auxiliary assistance on a constant or on-demand basis. We are confident that we will provide valuable insights and guidance to help your company thrive as much as possible. We will work hands-on with you to improve your business operations as required. So CIAVA has developed a unique program for entrepreneurs and innovators seeking to start or expand their business in Canada. The program is designed to develop strategies that will maximize the chances of success for foreign entrepreneurs seeking to immigrate to Canada under a PNP or the Startup Visa Nomination Stream, or Startup Visa Immigration Stream. So it starts with idea development, market validation, product description, pitch deck and business plan as per the DI's requirements, financial planning, finally a presentation to the designated incubator, feedback loop, final presentation, and letter of support. So we have the idea development loop again, letter of support idea, further development, market validation, product description, pitch deck and business plan, and then financial planning. After letter of support, so we do continue to provide service after letter of support to maximize the chance of business success. This includes progress check meetings, patent and trademark consultations, website and social networking development, consultation networking, and mentorship. Now I'd like to invite Hamed to take some questions as well. Thank you.
All the participants, all the presenters, and people who are joining us virtually through different platforms, social media. Sorry about the internet outage. It's not in our hands, so we can't do anything about it. We take some questions if we have questions online.
Thank you for the presentation and going over the steps. It would be great if you can quickly give us an example of a case that what happened, what kind of business, and the process, so it make it easy to understand.
About the startup. Okay, so we can cover what we do as in CIAVA, and we can cover what an ideal startup program can do here. As Jason mentioned, it needs to be innovative. So if for example you have an idea, and you think that is very innovative, and you can compete on a national scale, because everything happens here, we have to eventually take it to the States. So we need a bigger market, so it needs to be like on a scale, on a level that is feasible to compete on that level of competition and market. It needs to be, it needs to technically have what we can say, technology, something new, something beside it, like a traditional business. Like if you have like a garage and creating things, it can be something like that, something on a very low level. You can scale it in the future, but it should be scalable. So you have to have something in mind, do your market research, start your business plan writing, start with your business concept, try to find a designated organization, get a letter of support, and after you have everything in place, you can start actually doing your business. We have many clients who have their own business back in home or even here in Canada, and before even they think about getting into the startup program, they have their business and like platform and everything ready. And after they receive the letter of support, they just start to expand it and do it the way that the business startup program requires. What we do is before we before we even start with writing the business plan, we do a very thoroughly market research. Actually, the idea is to get out and talk to people, talk to the customers, and get their opinion, because whatever we have in mind, it's not like 100% accurate, so we have to talk to people. Because of COVID, for the past 2 years, we couldn't do that, so we try to do everything online, talk to people, do a survey, everything through like media, social media, or just internet. Then we come up with the business concept. We check the financial aspect, do the financial feasibility study, come up with the business plan. So when we have the business plan, we go to designated organizations, we try to get a lot of support, and after we receive a lot of support, we start with our services for the part for the after letter of support, so post LOS. You have your letter of support, you apply to immigration, you're trying to come here and get a work permit and work on your venture, but it's like a big deal, so you can't do everything by yourself. You need consultation. Of course, designated organizations are there to help you. If you have angel investors, mostly they have some interest in your business, so they will help you for sure. If you have a venture capital, a little. If you have a business incubator, they do mostly more than those two. But we are here as well, so we help you with your networking. If you find any, like a specific profession, if you need like help to develop your website, if you help to apply for a grant or for any type of, I would say, financial assistantship, if you're trying to, after even getting a lot of support, if you're trying to find some investors, sell your shares, anything that can help you expand your business, and hopefully you will be successful. And in very near future, you can sell your business and exit and go to the next one.
Thank you. Do you have an idea how long the process takes usually? Is it months or years?
Before we receive a letter of support, because a letter of support plays a very important, like a key role in this whole process. Usually it takes at least like 3 to 4 months. And after that you apply, technically you're very busy to apply to immigration. You need a work permit, you need a permanent residency, so you get your file together. People just tend to focus on that part and just let go of the business venture for at least a month or a couple of weeks. And after that, you have to start your business. It doesn't matter if you received your work permit or not, you have to start it. It depends on the country which you're applying from for a work permit. If you're in Canada right now, it takes approximately 4 months. And after a work permit, because you apply for permanent residency simultaneously, right now it takes 31 months. So after 31 months, the immigration officer for sure will ask for the progress that you have. So you need to have a progress report ready. That is one of the services that we provide, because throughout the 31 months or even more, we have our regular meetings. So we check everything, we give you feedbacks, we help you to prepare that progress report. So by the time that the immigration officer opens your file, you have your progress report ready.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any online question or other question?
Yeah, there are a few questions, but I believe that you have already answered them all. But after we receive the LOS, do we have to do market validation again?
Oh, yeah. This is something that people ask often. The thing is, as I say, it takes at least 5-6 months before you can come here and start your business. So many of the aspects that you cover in your market validation and market research at the beginning may change. We have had several examples of the businesses that we try to run, and by the time that everything was ready, someone else started that bigger and better. Because you never know, other people can do it in their basement, in their garage, and you never understand what stage they're at. So it's very important. After you receive a letter of support, you have to do the market research again. It's a very ongoing process. All the time, it's a very ever evolving. So you have to change, you have to do the survey again, you have to do the research again, you have to talk to your customers. If you see that one aspect of your business doesn't work out, so you have to change it. You have to adapt yourself with the market, the future market, let's say.
Yeah, the key is to develop a successful business. So if that requires pivoting the idea into a different sector or your related product, whatever the business is, you have to be willing to undertake that.
I don't have a question, it's more of a comment. I think I can speak on behalf of all the incubators here and accelerators to the applicants. Do not try to write your own business plans. Personally, I've received gray hairs from reviewing business plans that are not written by professionals. It's just not worth it. You don't want to take that risk with your application. And typically, innovators are generally broadly focused. So when it comes to writing a business plan, they really don't want to get into all those details, which is critical when you, as a reader, you're trying to understand what is this idea about. So please do not try to write your own business plans.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we have had that, like, actually a couple of times. We had problems with people. Usually when they're startup applicants, they are very specialized in specific like sector. They're like very professional in tech and medicine, and they have their own specialty. But when it comes to business plan, because let's face it, you have like for startup visa program, you have 4 different areas that you need to cover. You need to be expert in your own business. So for example, if it's like an AI app, you need to be professional in AI. You need to know how the process works. So how to get your permanent residency through that profession that you have. You need to do a great market research, and you need to come up with a professional business plan. So these are all different. So if you know AI, if you're like a doctor of medicine, and you have an idea, you don't know how to sell it. That's a tricky part. That's something else. So yeah, as Noah mentioned, we need to cover all that. Yeah.
Would you be able to further elaborate on pivoting business? My understanding is that when you get a letter of support, you get it for a specific business idea with specific projections. So, and I do understand your comment that it's ever evolving. However, if you do have a letter of support for a very specific business, so how do you pivot after when you arrive, even if you know there are other competitors out there?
This pivoting comes especially to selling and to your market, your future market. So some examples, we had some businesses that trying to sell something that's very, very unique and specific. And after they did the market research, after they received the LOS, they understood that that doesn't make sense and that doesn't make them money. So they pivoted and tried to make it a subscription based. So everything changed, like the market research changed, the financial projection changed, because, for example, instead of selling each unit for $500, they tried to make $10 per month. And in the long run, it helped them a lot, and they're more successful right now.
So pivoting in terms of market strategy rather than the business idea itself.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, and then my second question would be, so we do understand that when basically the prospective business owners come here to develop their business, they would face many hurdles, but we do also understand that incubators are there to help them through. So I want to understand, where does SIAVA's service basically comes in? So what is there that the incubators won't do that you would expect step in to cover and do?
What they wouldn't do that we will do. So technically, we're not just focused on startup. We have entrepreneur clients. We have Canadian clients that they're thinking about running a business, and that's totally separate from immigration. So they have nothing to do with immigration. They just want help with their business. So we already have that system in place. And for our entrepreneur clients, their system, their path is totally different. So we have all those in place. So when we help a client to get a lot of support, we're not gonna just leave them high and dry. We know that business incubators are there, but we can't be sure that the clients do their due diligence and do whatever the business incubator asks them. And they cannot force the client to do something. We are worried about the result of their application. So we are there to help them, even if they can't help themselves. Yeah.
No,
It's
thank
okay.
you so much for clarifying. My question was pertaining mostly to the second part. So business plan step is the first step for you to basically present and get the letter of support, but once they got it, they get the work visa, they are here. Now I wanted to know which areas would that, and then he perfectly clarified for me that basically they will make sure that the clients do what are told by the incubators, and basically you're there to get them to do their job. Okay.
You're pointing out. There is also this, I don't want to call it cultural aspect, but there's also this, the way people go about following up with their incubator, how punctual some people are. There might be applicants that are very specifically knowledgeable about what they're doing, about their business, they're passionate enough, but they're not punctual enough, or they don't know how to follow up with their incubator, or sometimes they don't even, they have trouble understanding what exactly is required of them, and you can only expect so much from an incubator. They have their own system in place, and we are here sort of like a tutor that helps the student understand or have a better interaction with their professor or with the university or whatnot.
Sorry, I think it's not a technical question, but it's a very, and I believe it will come up later in the process. Will it be a package that you offer in terms of, all these services, or there are basically pieces that the client could purchase and, add on to?
Both.
Okay.
Both. We're pretty flexible when it comes to the services that we offer to clients, especially for this matter after LOS. Some clients ask for our services on like an ongoing monthly basis. Sometimes they just have needs, specific needs. For instance, they have trouble doing their secondary market validation. They need our help in terms of like reaching out to people, talking to industry players, or there can be times where they need help going about finding investors, better investors, or like more broader investors. So anything for that matter that comes up, we're here to help. We don't force the clients to go on a monthly or on like an ongoing service package, but if this is something they want, we're happy to offer.
I would like to ask Sherry and Nova. Sherry Calburn and Nova Oliphant from Synergy Lab to come on this stage.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sherry. This is Nova. I just wanted to start off speaking to you all today. Let me start with a thank you to Mansouri for inviting us to this conference. So our story begins with a bit of a backdrop. Synergy Lab is actually a sister company to Spark Center, and Spark Center is one of the designated entities under the Startup Visa program. While it's difficult to start a business in your own country, it is exponentially more difficult to do so in a foreign country, where your cultural norms are not necessarily aligned, certainly your language is not aligned, and so there's a ton of things that you need to learn, both the things that are spoken as well as those that are unspoken. And so it's a very challenging route to get into a business when you're in a foreign country. What I was keenly aware of is that there were a lot of really wonderful entrepreneurs all around the world who would love an opportunity to come to Canada. And Canada needed those entrepreneurs. I think Carrie spoke to it very eloquently this morning. Foreign entrepreneurs are so integral to Canada's growth. And the amount of hustle that they bring to our country is truly awe-inspiring. Scale is everything in the entrepreneurial world. And as a serial entrepreneur, there's tons of ideas. And if you want a lifestyle business, that's fine. But that does not qualify under the startup visa. You have to have a scalable business. And so what we look for when we are looking at entrepreneurs coming through the front door of Synergy Lab is entrepreneurs that have grit, hustle, a great idea, and something that's immensely scalable. And if you've got those kind of 4 elements, then we will take you in with open arms and kind of teach you the ropes. One of the other things that we did at the Spark Group of Companies is we created this initiative called the Eastern Ontario Innovation Corridor. And the reason we did that is because if any of you know anything about Toronto, You'll know that there's this amazing corridor in Toronto called the Toronto-Waterloo Corridor. It is literally Silicon Valley of the North. They spin out all kinds of incredible companies. The issue in Eastern Ontario, where we're from, we're in the East Gateway of Toronto, is there wasn't the same amount of momentum and buzz and or supports for entrepreneurs. And so when we were receiving these international entrepreneurs into our incubator, the challenge was, how do we really support them to become very, very successful? And so I used my network and the network of some of my colleagues, and we built this initiative called the Eastern Ontario Innovation Corridor. And really what it is a collaboration of innovation hubs, investors, VCs, you know, every industry partners, all who come together, academic institutes, who all come together with the idea of supporting the entrepreneurs who are coming into our region to make sure that they get their feet down and they have a real community to live in. So I'm going to, with that, turn over to Nova, and she'll tell you more about Synergy Lab and how we do things there.
Thank you, Sherry. So we help international startups navigate the Canadian market. That's what we do, and it relates to what Sherry was saying is it is a challenge. They are coming from a new place to another new country, among new peoples with new innovation and ideas, and how do they help to navigate? Most of the times, English is a second or third language. That in itself is a barrier. Other times, they are time zones different. You know, Iran is probably 8 hours ahead. So how do they connect with their customers when they're not even on the time zones? So Synergy Lab has helped more than 250 companies gone through program from over 15 different countries. And we're very proud to say at least 150 female founders. So most of the clients that we're assisting, they're considering bringing a new business to Canada. We also have a second bucket of clients that we help where life is good back home. They're not looking to immigrate to Canada, but what they're looking for is to penetrate the North American market. Again, they still need access to market in order to get to their customers. So through workshops, advisory services, one-to-one mentoring, introduction to industry experts, we're able to help these companies scale and grow and drive some business growth. So we work as of date up to, I believe we're up to 17 different countries. The participating countries we've worked with, Iran is our number one, Hong Kong, China, and Brazil. And then we've worked with others, Nigeria, Libya, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Bangladesh, Thailand, and also Taiwan and Japan. So we've had experience working with a lot of different cultures. So we work with advisors, experts. We are not the experts, they are, but this is how we help companies to drive growth. Our advisors have expertise in growing and scaling business beyond 1 million in annual revenue, and they work with company in key sectors. Some of these key sectors are agricultural technology. We work a lot with the E3, which is environment, energy, and engineering. Most of our projects are coming out of health and life sciences, which is why earlier on you saw Queen's University. They have an active engagement within the EOIC to support any healthcare medtech products coming through. We also work with advanced manufacturing and materials, information technology and digital media, and of course, because of Durham region, obviously we love anything clean tech or agri-tech related. Some of our lead partners are corporate legal experts. Earlier on, you mentioned, don't try to incorporate on your own. Try to figure out what are the advantages and disadvantages of incorporating federally versus provincially. So we have legal experts that meet with them, including intellectual property. They want to file out about patents, about trademarks, what that looks like in their startups. We also introduce them to financial and banking experts. Most of our clients are able to open Canadian business bank accounts from back home. And then also cybersecurity. We now have that is becoming more popular now with our startups because of what's happening in the cybersecurity world. So I wanted to give you an example of a growth story And I think this company probably will resonate with you. They are from Iran, and it's a team that was founded for physicians and IT experts, and they developed a game-based, it's a sort of a virtual reality device that uses AI, VR, and artificial intelligence to enable stroke patients. So when we met them in November 2019, their challenges, obviously like everyone else, they're unfamiliar with the Canadian market and the ecosystem. They're trying to look at their go-to-market strategy. And we thought, what a wonderful product and project and innovation they came up with. So through advisory services, we asked, so who's going to pay for this? And they said, well, the patient. The patient suffered from the stroke, and this is the device they're using. And we said, oh no, in Canada, we don't want to pay for anything, not even after a stroke when it comes to healthcare. So let's pivot a bit. You need to get this as a medical device, as a software for medical device. So we're going to need to do a lot of clinical trials to really validate what you're saying, that a client or a patient could use this from home, do their own exercises, and that a physiotherapist or a cardiologist would validate that this is good to go. So Sherry made introductions, and the team to University of Toronto and McMaster University, they started clinical trials right away. They also started clinical trials in Tehran because they're still back home. So again, the challenge of innovators coming up with something great, but the go-to-market strategy was incorrect, and now they need to pivot. And that one pivot, we talked about that in the business plan. It changes everything. Now the advertising strategy, you've got to tweak that, your marketing strategy, even your value proposition, because now you're not going to the end user. You're trying to go to the physicians and the doctor. So great company that has made traction. So I want to talk a little bit about the BMC. I just want to bring it up lightly because it relates to market research. So we help them through different stages, put in those pieces together. And this is where the experts come in because of the language barrier. When they're ready to go to market, they may have all the information because it's their idea, but they really don't know how to put that in writing, into a questionnaire, into a survey, and to get it out to their customers. And so they may not even have the courage to speak to customers because, again, it's a language barrier. So we encourage our startups to hire someone, if it's even fractional sales, that can start business development here on the ground, whether you're here in Canada or not, and they can make this traction on your behalf until you get where you need it to be. Sherry, I'm going to talk to you a bit about cultural nuances. So part of our program includes Canadian Business Workshop, and we get to learn a lot about the internationals, and they, in return, get to learn a lot about us.
You quickly learn how to adapt to the cadence of the country you're in. Yeah, so Spark is one of the regional innovation centers in Ontario, funded by the provincial government, strictly 100% focused on local entrepreneurs. But in my mind, maybe because I've had so much of an international experience, I felt that that was really a missed opportunity for our community to attract very smart innovators. And so we created Synergy so that we could do that. I could not do that under my provincially funded organization. And so like the startup mindset that we're always looking for, when you hit a barrier, what do? You don't take no for an answer, you figure it out, and that's what we did. We said, well, we can't do this under Spark because it's not permitted. It's not a permitted service. So let's create a for-profit organization that operates independently and can provide these services that we well know but could not provide under the regional mandate. So that's how it came about.
And we've had, when Synergy started, it was sort of like a feeder program to get to Spark. And because Spark is a startup visa designate, that's truly the only way you work with internationals. But on the Synergy side, we saw that we were turning business plans away because they were not good for Spark under SUV. And we thought, but wait a minute, they're good for the region. So Synergy also branched out and pulled away from Startup Visa and wanted to work with other programs that support different business immigration pathways just for that reason. Not everyone's going to come over and Startup Visa. Perhaps they want to buy a business. Perhaps they want to enter through the PNP or the C11, like you mentioned, and there's a due diligence that has to go with that.
So you can imagine when you're doing work like this, you know, we are in very close partnerships with our economic development folks, with our universities, and you know they want to be able to benefit from the supports that we put in place. And so really it's a immigration at its core is an economic impact initiative. It is a way of improving people's regions for the better. So that's why we are really only interested in entrepreneurs that wish to come to Eastern Ontario. So if I had to sum up Eastern Ontario, I would say it's a very strong community-based area of Canada, and we are Canadians after all. So we share that common politeness and welcoming behavior, but it's very affordable and very livable, and
yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Hamid.
Thank you, Sherry and Nova. Very interesting and helpful. The next speakers are from MTA. I invite Marshall Ring, the CEO of MTA, and Sydney Pfeiffer, the Manager of Business Development of MTA, to please come to the stage.
Well, thank you very much. And before we start, I would just like to thank the Mansouri Immigration Firm. It is just great to be here and able to see people in person after a long hiatus from being able to develop interpersonal relationships. So I hope I'm not too rusty. I haven't been giving too many presentations recently. So, and before starting, I'd also like to thank all of the presenters and the people participating in the conference. As our first speaker, Carrie, said, Canada needs immigration for us to continue our economic future. So just by everybody's participation here, by the comments you've made, by raising awareness to the importance of immigration and to the fact that we're so dependent on it, more activity like this will help highlight that awareness, keep the engagement going, and drive our country forward. So my name is Marshall Ring, and I'm responsible for the Manitoba Technology Accelerator for, maybe not everybody knows, the province of Manitoba. That means I am from sunny, wonderful Winnipeg. So Sydney's going to come up in a little bit and speak about our startup visa program. But first, I am going to give my objectives. Number one, I want to talk a little bit about MTA. I love my work so much, and I just hope I can share a little bit of the passion that I have for what we do with the people participating in the conference today. Number two, I want to specifically present on MTA's gold standard startup visa program. And number three, I know it's a bit competitive now, I want to make this the best 45 minutes of your day. That was a pretty good 45 minutes before. That was a pretty good 45 minutes before, but we're going to give it a shot. And we've got a lot of similarities. So just in terms of the words we use, like market validation, right? 5 smart people in a dark room building something nobody cares about. So I think actually it was wonderful to see in your presentation and having some alignment with how we grow companies as well. So about MTA, we are a private sector, but not-for-profit business incubator, and we are governed by a private sector volunteer board of directors. So we have John Clarkson from the Ontario Brain Institute is a member of our board of directors. We've got venture capitalists from Minneapolis in the United States, and a number of people from Winnipeg. MTA has 3 business units, and part of what I want to communicate today is MTA in general and how we build and commercialize technology companies so that hopefully people can see the alignment to how we do that with our startup visa program. So in business unit number 1, which is our commercialization business unit, similar to Spark, we would work with Canadian companies that are trying to grow and scale. Then we also have developed MTA investments and want to communicate a little bit about how we directly invest into our client companies. And then third, I'll invite Sydney to the stage, and Sydney can speak specifically about our startup visa program, how we operate, and hopefully there's a fit with some of the people in the room to participate with that. So On commercialization, so the MTA Commercialization Business Unit, I always like to define commercialization and make a bit of a distinction between commercialization and innovation. So to me, commercialization is the art of making money from innovation. It's not innovation. It's not coming up with a great idea. It's taking that great idea, turning idea into a product that customers and consumers can give you money for, and making money from that innovation. In our business unit, we do not focus on the founders. We also, through our intake process, we always want to validate investor and customer demand. So another simple analogy I would use is if you've got a car, and maybe this example is becoming antiquated with the advent of electric vehicles, but a car is no good if it doesn't have gas, right? It just sits on the driveway. So we want to know that if gas is, in my example, investor money, if we've got to drive companies forward and they need investment capital, what we immediately do is we socialize the concept to our investor group. And if there's no traction with the investor group, then we know the company is not going to be able to acquire some capital to start moving it forward. So we say we might not be the best fit. Similarly, what we want to do is we want to go out and what we call them as XYZ letters. Go talk to, and we use the pen example all the time, go talk to people, possible customers, and say, if I can build this thing that works, how many units would you buy? What product features, attributes do you need to build into it? And at what price would you get it for us? So we want to start validating the idea in the hands of customers and consumers based on the value propositions we have. And we might find out that instead of having a blue pen, they want a black pen. So we integrate those features, attributes, and benefits from the market into our product development process, and we start driving companies forward. So assembling people and putting them into the highest and best use is really what we're focusing on, surrounding this disruptive, innovative technology with people that can help scale it and bring it out into a global company. Who we work with, we're really good at, and I know the term isn't used that much anymore, but we're really, really good at working with people in the valley of death. So on a financing term, what happens is someone comes up with an idea and then usually they can bootstrap for a little bit. But then when they start needing to find angel investments, oftentimes the founder doesn't have a track record in building a business. They're still a little bit too risky. So it falls into the valley of death where a lot of ideas die because they cannot get capital. So what MTA does is we do a couple of things. Number one, we lead with our chin. We directly invest money into our startup companies. Number two, we apply our management skills and our management teams to help mitigate the management gaps that startup companies have. So now when we start going to external angels, they know that we're already in, they know that we're putting our people in, that we've solved management gap, and they know we've already validated this into the market. So we're starting to mitigate risk and solve that point of the valley of death. From there, there's opportunities for more structured financing to come in once the company has early traction and a management team. So what we do in terms of our values that we give, propositions we give to our client companies is we are an incubator, if you use the term, providing space. So think of us like a fancy Starbucks. We've got really good coffee. We've got really fast internet. We are on Bell, so the thing is up today. And then on the business program, the accelerator side, we mentor, coach, and participate as a second area of value. So on the commercialization business unit, so again, that's the one business unit we're talking about right now, there's about 15 portfolio companies that we have, and I sit on the management team for all of those companies. We also go out into our community and we find a CEO mentor, someone who has the skills, expertise, and the track record, a brand name in the space that people are trying to commercialize their technologies. They sit in on the management team. And we apply a very rigorous commercialization pathway. So we will take people in at different stages. Our commercialization pathway starts at idea, feasibility, development, launch. How we work and help the clients depends on the stage they come in. But we do take clients in at the idea stage and we help them early. So that is both applicable to the commercialization stage as well as to our SUV clients. And then the third thing on the commercialization side is we never want someone to have a great idea but not have money and have them robbed from the opportunity to chase their dreams. And number three is we're really focused on building companies. We're not particularly focused on building entrepreneurs. We are focused on building companies. And what's fascinating now, and this comes back to the growth of our community and how growing companies can be a really powerful tool, is all 5 of those founders are back into their second or third startups. They're reinvesting the earnings, they're reinvesting the management skills they've learned. We're transforming the economy and the landscape of Winnipeg based on innovation and commercialization. We spoke, if you remember that financing curve, it looked like the red line was a J curve, right? So you start, you don't lose any money, but you might need to invest $200,000 or $2 million before you hit a point of inflection where you have an unfair competitive advantage that helps your technology scale and grow. So you should have exponential growth when you're building technology companies. So we do 2 levels of investment directly from MTA into our client companies. And this is applicable to our SUV client companies as well. Number one, if someone's got a great idea and we like the, the cut of the jib and we like their passion and they're ready to grind it out, we got $25,000 for them right off the hop. So if someone needs some money to go get an MVP, we want to be there to help. What we do with that as well is we leverage that. We've got a great relationship with IRAP in our area, and we can turn that $25,000, which is held as equity, we can match that with $50,000 from IRAP. So a company that we want to work with, if they're at the idea stage and we think that they've got a chance to go, we can immediately infuse $75,000 of capital to them, put in place myself and a CEO mentor onto that team, and immediately start building an MVP to go after the clients that we've identified. So I just wanted to take a moment to speak about MTA, how we help build companies, a little bit of our success that we have with that, and we've taken that model and we've now applied it to the Startup Visa program. So the model we have for our Startup Visa program is applied against the platform that we've had success with in the commercialization business unit, and the tools and the infrastructure are there to help client companies. So with that, I'd like to invite Sydney up, and Sydney's going to speak. Sydney is our Manager of Business Development and will speak a little bit more about the Startup Visa program.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you, Marshall, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak about MTA's SUV program. As Marshall has mentioned, my name's Sydney, and I am the Business Development Manager here at MTA. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I want to communicate the following key features to our SUV program. So first is our intake model and screening process. Second is the process of acceptance, so our program fees, and I know that's a point everyone's usually interested in hearing about. The third will be, once a client's accepted into the program, how do we provide services for them? And then lastly, our graduation package. Okay, so it's my hope that at the end of my presentation, everyone recognizes why MTA is considered the gold standard for SUV programs. We want to have it quick, defendable, and consistent. So therefore, we've standardized our application package. This will include an application, a 2-page business plan, and a 5 to 10 PowerPoint slide. We typically focus on businesses that have an innovative idea, can create jobs for Canadians, and can compete on a global scale. These are also some requirements of the IRCC for the SUV program. So we then apply a triple due diligence screen to the application before we accept the client. This is like our own internal peer review process to make sure that MTA applies a rigorous due diligence. So next, I want to talk about our acceptance process. So if the applicant is recommended by the screening committee and a business advisor is willing to accept the client, we'll then issue a contract for this client, which is valid for 60 days after being accepted. So once in the program, clients will receive one-on-one business advisory services with world-class business advisors who educate clients on how to do business in Canada and also move clients along to MTA's commercialization pathway, which Marshall had spoken about earlier. The amount of hours for these clients on each contract depends on how many people are on the team, and it goes from either 5 to maximum 13 hours. So for a one-person team, we offer 5 hours of advisory services per month, and then for 5 people, so it's 2 hours for each additional team member, so 13 hours in total. And if they wanted to add additional services, we can always increase those hours as well and adjust the contract. In terms of graduation, after that 18-month term contract, MTA will send a formal graduation package to clients, which will include a graduation certificate, a compilation of the monthly status reports that I was just speaking about, which are prepared by the business advisor. These are also fully auditable by the IRCC, and they show the progress and efforts that are made by the client. To conclude, the elements of our program that ICs and clients really like are the 3 levels that we do for screening. So 2 are internal or external. Speed, so like I mentioned, 30 days to get our letter of support. That's really, really great for these startup visa program clients. We have a fully auditable monthly report to demonstrate to IRCC activity and engagement, and then, of course, our one-on-one business advisory services.
Hopefully we've given enough structure and process that, number one, gives a touch of the level of excitement that I have for what we do to the members of the audience, and that there's opportunity for some engagement and conversation. So hopefully there's some questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I have multiple questions, so I'll start with one, and then if there's time, I'll go with another one. So thank you for the presentation. I do understand that there are multiple layers of service that your company provides. However, that would be very specific to our case, which would be immigration. Now, you mentioned 2 things. First is a standardized application, and then how your intake application would look like. I would like to understand, do you provide services for the client to basically present that business plan that you're looking for in that application, or that 5 pagers of the PDF that you want, or no, another, basically, another company has to be retained to provide that for your application?
Can I answer that one first, and then you can go to the next one?
Yes, go ahead.
So one of the things we are very mindful of is we never want to write our own applications and then adjudicate the validity of those applications. So all we do is we look at applications. There are consultants who will help clients write business plans or write the application process. We stay well clear of any of that. We want to maintain our integrity of reviewing applications. And so if people say they want help writing it, sure, we've got consultants that we think do a good job, who understand the process, who don't have to go through the learning, right, so that they are less expensive than if someone has to just learn for the first time. But we will not write them, but we will refer you to consultants who could. And then this time lag started going, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is unfair to the clients. Like, nobody's going to sign up for 33 months of like an indefinite requirement, and then who's going to quit the program after spending 22 months in the program, because then you lose all your progress. So we said, why don't we just go back to our original vision, which is we think 18 months. That should be plenty of time for us to help clients. And you know, it's not a sprint, right? It's a slow relationship building. It's helping build some infrastructure and some relationships, helping people understand how to do business in Canada and how to validate their market and build MVPs. So we figured 18 months was a very fair cutoff point. What we're finding is a lot of clients then say, after 18 months, can we stick with you guys for 2 to 3 months, or 2 to 3 hours, like a reduced fee, but just to keep contact and just to show that, like, keep some momentum until they get PR. So, but at 18 months, we consider a client a graduate, a client in good standing, and we continue to support their process with IRCC. We're not here to say someone's got to sign up with us for 33 months. Thank you very much for the attention and the questions. We're going to, of course, be here for lunch, and we'd love to have a follow-on conversation.
Moving forward, our next speakers are from DMCL. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Travis and Marcus.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I feel a little bit like a celebrity walking up the long path there. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for coming and listening to us on a Friday afternoon. I thought I would start off by just saying a few jokes. The first one would be we should all take our phones out. This is probably the only session we'd ever say this. And just turn your volume up as high as possible, because nobody's going to get a phone call this afternoon. Rogers is still down, so apologies for that. And I also wanted to just talk a little bit about Canadian culture. We are known to apologize, so I'd like to apologize for not only the phone disruption, but also for the wonderful weather we've had over the last few weeks. I know it feels like the middle of the summer, but in all seriousness, hopefully we'll have a little bit better weather here in the next few weeks, and we can all enjoy a sunny summer. So I'm not going to talk too much about our firm, because already there's a wonderful introduction, but I would just say that DMCL has been in the British Columbia community for over 30 years now. We have an office in Vancouver downtown, just a couple blocks from here. We have an office in Port Coquitlam, an office in Surrey, and we have an office now in Victoria, and we've been open in Victoria for a few years now. So I'll just get right into it. We're going to try and give a nice overview of a number of different matters that might impact you and your business. We're going to talk about corporate taxation, family trust, partnerships, some different structures, some tips and traps, tax rates, and things like that. So I will get right into it, and we're going to have a good opportunity to have some questions and answers at the end here. All right, so we're just going to get into our first slide around corporate taxation. So wanted to just go over the traditional types of structures that we see, corporate structures we see in Canada. We have what are known as Canadian-controlled private corporations, which is exactly as they're defined. They're corporations that are controlled by Canadian residents. A lot of people, when they come to Canada, they ask, well, do you have to have permanent residency in order for a company to be considered a Canadian-controlled private corporation, or do you need to have citizenship? The answer is no. A Canadian-controlled private corporation is one that's controlled by a Canadian resident for tax purposes. And being a resident for tax purposes is not necessarily the same as having a work visa or having PR with the government or even being a citizen. You have to meet a number of tests. Oftentimes the tests relate to how long you've resided in Canada for and whether or not you have ties to another country. But if you have a permanent home in Canada, if you have a job in Canada or a business in Canada, even if you don't have PR status, you could still incorporate a company and be considered a Canadian-controlled private corporation. And there's many benefits associated with this type of structure, which is why it's number one on the list here. A subset of a Canadian-controlled private corporation is a professional corporation. Then we also have general purpose active businesses. So that's your standard business that operates, a clothing store, a pharmacy, and these companies all, if they're Canadian-controlled private corporations, they benefit from the tax advantages associated with them. Then we have passive businesses, which are oftentimes incorporated as well. And these types of businesses are generating passive investment income, which could be things like having a portfolio, stock portfolio that's generating dividend income, or it could even be a business where one is generating rental income. There are several different thresholds that we look at as to whether a business is considered passive or not. And then there's other private corporations, and these are very typical in Canada as well, where there's oftentimes large shareholder groups where there might be shareholders out of the country. And so if the shareholders control, if the primary shareholders control less than 50% of the business, it's considered to be an other private corporation. Again, not subject to the same tax benefits as a Canadian-controlled private corporation. And then, of course, we have publicly traded corporations, which are subject to different tax rates, but also different regulations from national regulators. Probably the biggest tax benefit associated with a Canadian-controlled private corporation is significant tax deferral. And what tax deferral is a delay of paying tax. And what we usually look at is, can we delay paying tax as long as possible? And the private corporation structure allows us to do that. And effectively, in a corporate structure that's a Canadian-controlled private corporation, the first $500,000 of taxable income is taxed at 11%. And we do have full corporate rates that we'll show you a little bit later in the presentation. But that's a very significant benefit. If you're running the same business as a sole proprietor, for example, the top bracket's now 53.5% in British Columbia, which is the combined federal and provincial bracket. So there certainly is a deferral advantage. You're left with 42.5 cents more on every dollar. That we've already talked about about funds being kept in a corporation, and the ability to claim the lifetime capital gains exemption. This is something that is only for Canadian-controlled private corporations. This exemption is available when you go and sell your business, and if you have a corporate structure and you're considered to be a qualified small business corporation, which is a type of Canadian-controlled private corporation. It's one where you're primarily running an active business and don't have significant amount of passive assets within the business. So if you're running a clothing store, you're running a pharmacy, you're running a clinic, that would be considered a QSBC, a qualified small business corporation. When you go and sell the shares of that business, the first $900,000 of gain on that sale could be free of any tax implications. And that's, again, only available for a Canadian-controlled private corporation. It's a very, very significant advantage. So another really good advantage of that structure. Using a family trust allows for a lot of flexibility in terms of income distribution. And the family trust would be set up as a shareholder of the corporation, and then the corporation would flow a dividend to the family trust, and then the family trust has discretion to allocate that income to beneficiaries. There are, again, like we talked about earlier, rules around the types of distributions that can be made to the beneficiaries. Depends on, again, how actively involved they are in the business. But if they are actively involved in the business, which would often be the case, then there's less restrictions. If the income is passive in nature, there are less restrictions as well. So if you're running an investment business where you're generating passive investment income, this is a really good structure to consider. I'm going to pass it off to Travis to talk about partnerships and a few other items, and then I'll come back here near the end.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Can everybody hear me? Good? Yeah, unlike Marcus, sometimes people do tell me to speak up, so just want to make sure. Next thing we're going to talk about here is partnerships, which is another structure that you can essentially have to operate. So a partnership is often set up as a separate legal entity, but is not taxed. And the reason why it is not taxed is all income is flowed through to the partners. In these cases, these partners get a T5013 slip, which is a statement of partnership income. And the partners can be individuals, corporations, or trusts. There's a couple of ways that you can set up partnerships. One is a limited liability partnership, or LLP, where all the partners share in a portion of the liability. And another structure that you can see is a limited partnership, where essentially one partner, called the general partner, shares the majority of the liability, while all the other liability is limited to their investment for the other partners. To themselves, whether it be a corporation or themselves personally. What I want to get into next is sole proprietorships, which Marcus briefly alluded to before. This is the simplest form of establishing a business, and essentially no corporation is set up. You essentially operate as yourself. One of the drawbacks of this potentially is there's no liability protection beyond your own personal insurance. And one advantage of this is actually that, it will depend on how you operate, is that there's no separate tax filing requirements, so there's less compliance. So from an administrative standpoint and a cost standpoint, this could be beneficial. And as Mark has already mentioned before, there's no ability to smooth income like with a corporation. So all the income that you earn in a taxation year, when it is earned, is taxed. So you may not be able to avoid high rate tax in a given year, which could be a disadvantage depending on what type of industry you're operating in. There is also less deductions available, as Mark has already alluded to. Sometimes we're on life insurance and you're limited on the medical expense claims. And there's no way to limit the Canada Pension Plan contributions, which is our national retirement fund. So that kind of covers the sole proprietorships. So what we'd like to get into next is just a little bit of additional filing requirements that is good to be cognizant of. The first being pretty basic, business licenses. So these may be required based on your jurisdiction or the industry that you're operating in. And also, if you're a professional, there may be additional professional licensing requirements. For example, us as CPAs, we have to be licensed with our governing body in order to operate. So another big one that we want to talk about is the BC employer health tax. So this applies when remuneration exceeds $500,000. The rate of the employer health tax is 2.925% of BC remuneration in excess $500,000 all the way up to $1.5 million, and it's 1.95% of remuneration when it exceeds $1.5 million. And for this, there is annual filing requirements. Something else we'd like to make you aware of is WorkSafe BC, which is essentially is our provincial employee insurance plan, and it essentially just covers coverage for workplace injuries. It is required for most businesses that have employees, so essentially if you have employees, it's definitely something that you need to be aware of and have to be paying premiums for. The rate is really dependent on the business type, so it's based on your industry, it's based on your claim history, and it's also based on your assessable total payroll. So that could vary quite significantly. And again, there's annual filing requirements as well. Next up is GST and PST. So I'll kind of go through these quite quickly. I'm sure some of you are already aware of these. At the federal level, we have GST, which is the sales tax that applies on the provision or sale of goods or services. Some of these goods and services are exempt or zero rated. Some examples of exempt goods or services are healthcare services, childcare, educational services, zero rated being groceries, food, prescription drugs. The rate is 5%, and the reason why we have HST up there as well is, certain provinces have combined their provincial sales tax, which we'll get into in a second, with the GST, which results in the harmonized sales tax, and this can result in a sales tax of up to 15%. Registrants are able to be credited for a GST or HST that they pay on expenses. So essentially, what you collect versus what you pay in GST can result in either a payable or a refund. And these filings are due either monthly, quarterly, or annually, depending on your situation. At the provincial level, we have the BC provincial sales tax, which has a rate of 7% on eligible goods and services. The difference with PST versus GST is there's no credit for PST paid on purchases. One caveat to that is, though, if you have purchased goods for resale, there is no PST on that as well. So if you are registered for PST and you go to a supplier with your registration number, you should be exempt. And just like GST, there is filing requirements that could be monthly, quarterly, or annually. And next up here, we have payroll. So if you have employees, you're required to remit source deductions on their behalf. This includes income tax, CPP, and employment insurance. One thing to always remember here is that you also have to pay the employer portion as well. For CPP, the employer portion, which is also a business expense, is 1-to-1. So if you have $1,000 in CPP withheld on a employee, the employer portion is also $1,000, and for EI, the rate is 1.4. So same thing, if you have a EI withheld on for an employee of $1,000, the employer portion is 1.4, so $1,400. Tax reporting for this must be prepared and provided to all employees by the last day of February each year.
More importantly, I think now is the time for questions. So please grill us with your difficult questions.
Hi, thank you so much for your information. My question is, if we consider that one person have a personal, like real estate corporation, and based on that, we do have a code for collecting GSP. If the corporation is not that active, should we report it to CRA, or there will be any charges or fee against not reporting that?
Well, that's a great question. So we didn't talk about the GST requirements in terms of thresholds. So if a business has income below $30,000 a year, and it's the income that it generates would otherwise be subject to GST, you don't need to register for a GST account. However, once you are registered, as long as you're registered, you have to file GST returns. So you could, if you decide, the company's not going to be active for a number of years, you could choose to deregister for GST. And once you filed your final GST return, you wouldn't need to file until you exceed the threshold again. But I generally advise to stay registered and to file because, again, as Travis mentioned, the company will receive input tax credits or a refund on the GST that it pays on its purchases. So as a personal real estate corp, you're spending a lot of money on marketing, you're spending money on materials, you're driving to and from your clients, and you're incurring, vehicle expenses. All of those expenditures are subject to GST. You can claim all of that GST and receive a refund, even if there's little to no revenue in the company. So I think it still is advantageous to do so. And registering and deregistering is actually a fairly tedious process. So I wouldn't decide just to deregister just because you think it's going to be inactive for a few years. I would stay registered and have the benefit of those refunds until the company becomes active again.
Thank you. And my question is about the filing period and the deadline. What if you pass the deadline? Is there any penalty? Is there any other activities you have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. The filing deadlines, though, if you happen to miss a filing deadline and you actually owe tax, that's when the issue is. So if, say, you were to owe tax at a filing deadline, and essentially, I'll get right to it. There's a 5% late filing penalty if you owe tax, and then on top of that late filing penalty, there's also interest on the balance that you owe. It becomes less of an issue if you don't owe tax or have a refund. Essentially, at that point, there is no penalties. But we still always tell you to file for compliance purposes, because what happens is if you file consistently late for, I believe it is 2 or more years, and eventually if you were to file late down the road, that 5% penalty actually goes to 10%. So compliance is always very important, even if you owe tax or not. But essentially, yes, there's late filing penalties and interest on any balance owing as well.
But thank you so much for being a good crowd. Appreciate it.
I would like to ask Mr. Sean Olson to come to the stage.
Thank you very much. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about empowered startups and what we do, and focus mostly on the startup visa program and also the foreign graduate entrepreneur stream. First off, I'm Sean Olson. I'm the VP of Business Development. I work with partners all over the world and entrepreneurs all over the world that are looking to use our programs to launch businesses and immigrate. So to start with, we'll just go a little bit into empowered startups. So when I first joined Empowered, we were largely focused on Canada. In the last 3 or 4 years, though, we've truly become a global incubator. We have a presence all over the world. We are running programs in the EU, Portugal and France specifically. We have an EB2 National Interest Waiver program in the United States, offices in both of those locations. And we also are still running the Startup Visa program and have expanded our Canadian offering to the Alberta Foreign Graduate Entrepreneur Stream. So we were one of the first designated organizations or designated incubators to be designated by the Canadian government. And we were a party to a number of conversations surrounding the initial stages of the program. And most organizations focus on the business, and the business is definitely important. That's the vehicle that people are able to leverage to access an immigration pathway. But we're pretty convinced that the Canadian government is really trying to attract the human being, right? That's who they're looking to attract. The human being is the one that is going to be resilient, creative, come up with multiple ideas. The Canadian government actually, in a moment of wisdom, actually realized that businesses sometimes fail, and that not every business is going to be successful. And businesses quite often, I think there's a 10% success rate or whatever stats you want to use for all businesses. Well, you can imagine coming from another country and launching a business in Canada, you're probably going to be subject to the same failure rates or success rates, however you want to look at it. So the Canadian government, when they created this program to replace the old Canadian Immigrant Investor Program, they were looking for people that were going to add value to Canada. And this program targets international entrepreneurs because of the skills and traits that they bring to the table. And they're trying to attract them. And they want those people to demonstrate activity and genuineness in their business because they just want to make sure those people are real entrepreneurs. One of the things that's great about the program, and I tell anyone who will listen, is that it's straightforward and simple, right? Like, it's not a complicated program. Most immigration programs around the world are fraught with all kinds of crazy sort of stages and levels. Startup Visa in Canada is have a business that's innovative, be genuine and active in the business, find a designated organization to approve your business. That's it, right? And then launch your business. That's it. Just do what you said you were going to do when you applied. If you do those things, the program is literally one of the best programs out there. Basically, there's an English language requirement. That's one of the main things that you have to be able to have a functional English language ability. Level 5 is not super high. And quite often, when you've dealt with enough international entrepreneurs, like our firm has gotten very good at being able to interact with people that have English as a second language. The business has to be innovated, okay? It has to be approved by a designated organization, okay? And we'll get into a little bit later what an innovative business looks like. And it has to be able to scale globally. This is one that's actually pretty important because we do get a lot of people proposing simple businesses, right, that don't have the ability to scale. And again, we'll speak a little bit about that in more detail. And then the founders have to be genuine. You know, this is one that we spend the most time at Empowered sort of trying to get to the heart of, right? And there's a number of techniques that we use, and our due diligence process is really just trying to get to the heart and soul of, you know, what are your intentions here, right? And really it's not because we're the deciding factor on, you know, what your intentions are, but we just know that if your intentions aren't to start the business, Could be a bumpy ride. If your intentions are to start the business, it's a great program and you'll get what you want. So we just try to make sure that we be upfront with people right out of the gate. And then there are ownership requirements and all those types of things. And then the other thing is that people have to be active in their business, right? And this is one thing that gets a lot of conversation as well. What does activity mean? Okay, what does active mean in a business? Well, for us, activity can take all different shapes and sizes. You might have a 25-year-old who is got all kinds of energy and wants to do everything themselves. Well, that's activity. That's great. That's someone that would be a great fit for the program. You also might have someone who's 55, who has built multiple businesses in their home country, right? And maybe has not got the same level of energy to do everything themselves. Maybe they've reached a certain status in their life where they can actually pay other people to do some of those things, right? Those people are great too, right? The CEO type of entrepreneur. You just can't be disengaged. You just can't be paying somebody to launch your business for you and not have any clue or any desire to understand what's going on in your business. So that activity piece is important, and it can be shaped a little bit depending on the type and stage of your entrepreneurship. And then lastly, and very simply, businesses need to be incorporated in Canada, and they also need to hold their intellectual property in Canada. Okay, and not every innovative business has intellectual property. That's a question I get a lot. But if you do, it does need to be held in Canada. That's one of the requirements of the program. No minimum investment. Okay, so there are no minimums. Many programs around the world do say you have to invest $200,000 or whatever it is. No minimums in the incubator category anyways. You only need to demonstrate your settlement funds. And then no business performance requirements. That's another one that I think is pretty important. And this is one of the things that, again, we work in different countries around the world and do startup visa and other programs that are entrepreneurial. And many of the other startup visa programs across the globe have put these strange and constricting and restrictive benchmarks on the business, right? Meaning that you have to hire this many people, you have to make this much money or this much revenue by year one. And Canada hasn't done that, and I think it's to our credit, and it's actually quite smart. The other things are flexible requirements. There's no age limit. There's no restrictions on where you can live. All those types of things. And then work permit. We've talked about that already. And one of the things I also mentioned with work permits doesn't mean you have to stay in Canada 12 months. Can't leave. You're a prisoner here, right? You can come on a work permit, and many of our clients come back and forth and go back to their homelands and visit family and do things and then come back again. So, I mean, the program and the work permit process does allow for life to exist in a commonsensical way, right? So, we think we do a pretty good job in the startup visa program. If you look at metrics over the course of the startup visa program, we were designated towards the end of 2014. We've been the most successful. We've had the most amount of approved clients. We've actually had the most volume of entrepreneurs, and we've been doing it for a long time. Okay, and experience matters in a lot of things, and I would say that startup visa program is one of those things. When you've done 350 some odd cases, you've taken your lumps along the way, and your next client, your 351st, doesn't necessarily need to learn like your first client needed to learn. Okay. We don't run cohorts. We can take clients today. If you had a qualified business right now and we were able to approve it, we could start working with you tomorrow. Okay, so there's no waiting around for a group of people of 10 to be ready to move forward in a program, which makes us nimble, and it allows us to work one-on-one with all of our clients throughout the entirety of our process. We're working with businesses at all stages. I would say our specialty is probably earlier stage startups, so pre-prototype. But we have worked with clients and businesses at all stages, and we don't really have a preference. They just require slightly different incubation and different services. Early stage startups, idea stage businesses, definitely we work all the time with them. Revenue stage businesses, we maybe have only 20-30% of our clients are at that stage, but definitely able to and work very well with those revenue stage businesses. How do you get going? Well, it's pretty simple for a client. Like we tell them all the time, all we need is a document package, and we can get back to you within 24 hours with our feedback and our thoughts. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. you know, the better the document package, the more accurate our evaluation can be. But we encourage people all the time to talk with, you know, firms like Mansouri to be able to get immigration advice in addition to startup visa advice. And we try to work very closely with our immigration partners to make sure that there's a full-throated sort of understanding of what that person's getting into, understanding each side has a role. But that's the goal, is to make sure that they're well educated so that they can move forward with confidence and have a good understanding of what to expect. That's one of the things that we've found over our 7 or 8 years, is setting those expectations early is really important to a successful journey. The bumpy ones usually come from when the client thought something that wasn't true, and they get 8 months in, and all of a sudden it comes to the surface that wasn't true. Now they think this, and now all the problems that have come make a lot of sense, because they either didn't get the right information or they got bad information, and there's no shortage of bad information floating around out there. And that's that.
Thank you, Sean, for the excellent speech and really informative. I have a question.
Sure.
So for the AAIP program, as far as I know, in addition to the foreign graduate entrepreneur stream, they also have the rural entrepreneur stream, and I think it's called entrepreneur stream. So is your firm also working on those 2 streams as well, or?
No, we're not. So I wouldn't be a great source of information on either of those streams, although I do know a little bit because it has come up in conversations quite a bit with other applicants, right? We're not, because, I mean, the rural stream is a little bit different than the startup stream. And just wasn't interesting to us, so we just didn't get involved. I believe the rural stream, instead of going through designated agencies, you go through basically the city council in the town, right? So the interesting part about this and the only thing I know about this is because we actually tracked down a client that was looking at both. And so we investigated a little bit, okay, well, what is this rural stream, right? And even the Alberta government right now doesn't know exactly how that process is going to work, right? Because, I mean, you go to, I don't know, Timbuktu, where there's 75 people in the town, and they have a city council where, you know, the mayor is, you know, the librarian, and he runs a gas station, and I mean, like, I don't know. They're still not sure how that's gonna, you know, how that approval process. I mean, I think it's 2-staged anyways, right? So they get approved by, you know, like a designated agency. The city council approves the business and the opportunity. It still needs to go through the Alberta government, right? So there is that second check to be able to say, hey, listen, I hear that you say you want this business to come, but it doesn't fit what we're looking for. Yeah.
Thank you. And I have another question. So regarding the startup program, so based on your best knowledge and based on your experience, what will be the expected successful rate for those applicants or the entrepreneurs?
So what would be the success rate? So I think I get the question a ton, right? And it's a tough one because like the stats are not published widely. It's really hard to corral all the information. What I tell people is that if you are a good client, so you have an innovative business, you actually want to launch it, and you're willing to put energy and effort into launching the business, the success rates are through the roof. They're like 98%, right? Every now and then the government does screw one up and you're like, okay, I don't understand, or you see a case, but they're through the roof, right? The problem becomes is when you start working on the fringes of the program, right? Where, you know, there's someone who is being given an idea and they don't really care about the idea and they're presenting it. Those ones, honestly, I don't know what the number is, but those ones definitely have a bumpy ride. And we find that, you know, what we're trying to do in our process anyways is to have those things come to the surface early so we can give the client good advice and say, hey, listen, this is not a great fit for you, right? You know, and for us, like we quite often, one of the nice things I have in the Alberta program is that we're able to sort of say, hey, listen, you know, you don't have an innovative business. You don't really want to launch that business. It's fairly clear. You know, you are a business person. Why don't you launch a business in Alberta, right? right? But I think those two categories is important to separate. The hard part is that, you know, like people always present the best face to you when they're trying to get into a program. So, you know, I'd be lying if I said we were perfect at evaluating whether someone's genuine and active and all those types of things, right? Oh, I'm getting out of here. No, I'm joking. I'll be around for a little bit. So yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Mr. Mansouri, thank you for holding this great event. I have a generic question regarding the immigration trends of this year. So what is your insight when you look at this immigration trends or policy from the national perspective?
Well, when it comes to business classes of immigration, we used to have more attention towards pathways that had sort of PR guaranteed or PR attached to them, or if you will, the dual intent application packages, such as PNP entrepreneur applications or startup program or buying a business, etc. But with the prolonged processing times these days, hence the COVID pandemic that we are seeing, more people are interested in pathways that are faster, at least quicker to arrive to Canada and worry about your PR later on. So IMP or even to some degree owner and operator LMI variation or C11, C12 intracompany transfer, these are picking up more attention, while people are still interested in the dual intent application packages such as PNPs. And a lot of times some of our clients choose to adopt both scenarios at the same time, meaning apply for a work permit under the IMP program, which is relatively faster, and have your longer vision on the PNP program so that hopefully you can arrive, get additional points for your exploratory visit, and then transition into the PNP program so that you have a good hope for your PR. Sure.
So I just take the chance and read one of the online questions. What are the differences between C11 and C12?
Okay, C11. These are both subcategories of the International Mobility Program, which essentially means you don't have an LMIA or labor market impact assessment. You can basically have a company offer you the job and come to Canada without assessing the impact that this job opportunity might have on the local labor market. C11 is for entrepreneurs themselves, for the owner of the business. An owner means if you control and have ownership of at least 51% or more in the business, and you're a director, you're basically undismissible from the business, then you can offer yourself a job from the corporation that you control the interest of and come to Canada. Typically, we need significant economic or significant cultural benefit attached to the business plan. We need to exploit on areas that gain you more significant benefits, such as Jason earlier pointed out, such as exporting Canadian goods and services, innovative ideas, remote business locations, employing more Canadians, etc. So C11 category, which is an exemption for LMI under the IMP, helps a variety of immigration pathways, such as self-employed people. Basically, if you have applied to come to Canada or are about to apply to come to Canada under the federal self-employed program, which is typically for athletes and people in arts and culture, then you can offer yourself a job and come to Canada faster while your PR application is in process. Or alternatively, C11 is also used for people that have a letter of support from an incubator in a SUV program. Again, we go with C11. Also, if you merely just want to come to Canada temporarily, you don't have permanent resident desires, you're well off in your own country, you have your business, but you just want to have a new business in Canada so that you can export your services and products to the North American market, then again, you can apply and obtain a closed work permit under C11. However, C12 is for intra-company transferees. Basically, if there is a company out of Canada that has a qualifying relationship with a company inside Canada, and qualifying relationship only has two different categories. A, they can be affiliates with each other, meaning the owner or owners of both companies are the same, at least for the majority or like more than 51% of the shares. And second scenario is subsidiary or parent relationship. Basically, the company that is outside is the parent of the company that is in Canada, or vice versa. This way, and also if these two companies have a qualifying business relationship with each other. For example, if I have a mechanic shop in Iran and I want to open a mechanic shop in Canada, this relationship doesn't qualify because these are not sort of guaranteeing one another's income or success. However, if I have an immigration practice in Canada, or for example in Iran, and I want to open an office in Canada, this qualifies potentially because the office in Iran enjoys the benefit of having its affiliate in Canada. It guarantees its success more and more. And also the office in Canada benefits from having an office in Iran because the office in Iran is sort of promoting, facilitating the recruitment of your new clients and the relationship thereafter, and the employees will help each other remotely, you know. So once these relationships are established, then you're looking at sending one of your qualifying employees to the new branch in Canada to start or to facilitate your business. But this is only temporarily. And in most situations, you can only renew that work permit for up to 7 years. A good example would be if we have one of our managers in our Iran company that is the manager of our, say, marketing or our temporary visa programs division. And we want to ask this person to come to Canada and help establish the new company or the division within the new company. The job positions that usually qualify are executive or senior managerial or specific knowledge or specific skills. Meaning if, for example, I have a jewelry, this is a real example of one of our files. This is a jewelry manufacturing, jewelry design company in Iran that we recently were working on. So they want to open their new branch, which will produce, export, and sell in Canada. So they need to send one of their designers that is especially knowledgeable and it has the particular expertise that is attached to the way they are doing their business. It's not easy for them to find someone to do the exact same things that this person does in Iran. So they're sending this person here temporarily so that he or she can recruit designers or manufacturers and train them and make sure the way they're conducting business in the Canadian branch is in accordance with the way that they are pleased to run their business. This is C12.
Thank you. My question is about, you specifically went to C11 for athletes and artists, and could you please give me a little more explanation of the requirements and the process?
So when it comes to athletes and artists, we have a permanent class that's called Federal Self-Employed Class. If you're able to demonstrate that you meet the specific criteria of this self-employed program, you can apply for PR from out of Canada and eventually hopefully be processed and approved and come to Canada as a PR. But because the process is long, for example, these days it takes about 36 plus months, you may wish to come to Canada faster because you can establish and prove to the officer that your ability to run your business successfully, have a good impact on Canada's environment, be it artistic impact or athletic impact, is probable, and you have all the means of success in Canada, you can apply under C11. So the C11 can be used for different situations, and this is one of them, to get your temporary work permit.
Another question is, can we change our business plan after we receive our work permit?
Depending on what kind of avenue you chose to get your work permit. For example, if it's a PNP entrepreneur situation, you have shown your business plan, you have satisfied the PNP officer of all aspects of your business plan, and they have supported you for your temporary work permit, no. If you come to Canada and don't stick with the requirements and the performance agreement that you signed with the government of the province, basically any changes are making you like fall out of your agreement, and meaning that the PNP may not eventually support you for your PR. However, if, for example, if it's a C12 situation or C11 situation, you can make some changes to the way you're, again, just like the startup visa program, you can pivot, but you can't go crazy and default on all of your promises and go start something completely new and expect the officer at the end of your authorized stay to renew your work permit without asking any questions.
Okay, so how can I become PR under IMP stream?
So IMP is a means of offering yourself or someone else a job without going through the labor market impact assessment requirements. It has nothing to do with permanent residency. This is important to note. It's just to avoid LMIA. So basically, you avoided LMIA, you got yourself a work permit. But now you have to think about getting your PR under other streams, such as federal skilled worker, maybe Canadian experience class, if your spouse gets a job offer, so on and so forth. So IMP itself is not a permanent immigration solution. This is very important to note.
Services. Please welcome Steve Ivako and Roy Tong on the stage.
Salam. I just learned this from my coworker Tina, who came from Iran 5 years ago. And I really appreciate this opportunity to be here and to give this short presentation. And I know it's a Friday afternoon, so I hope everyone can still keep awake. A quick agenda about this quick presentation. So I will give a quick introduction of our firm and our services related to immigration, that is the net worth verification regarding Provincial Nominee Program, or PNP. And also, I'm very honored to introduce my partner, Steve, to present a little bit regarding our family office services, because we believe that is quite important for the investors and entrepreneurs who come to Canada. And when they land here, they will need this service, and they want to be further successful for their life in Canada. And I will also leave a little bit time for questions and answers. A little bit information about our firm. MNP is the second largest accounting firm in BC, and we are the fifth largest accounting firm in Canada. We have offices from coast to coast, that is from Victoria in the west coast and to PEI in the east coast. Altogether, we have more than 7,000 professionals in our firm, including about 1,000 partners. And altogether, we have 117 offices. Regarding our services, we are a full-service accounting firm. That means in addition to the traditional accounting and tax services, we also have consulting, risk management, and forensic and litigation support, evaluation, insolvency, tax, and valuation. And for today, what we are going to introduce is the net worth verification and family office services. For the net worth verification, so as you may know, there is a specific program called the Provincial Nominee Program, and in that, there is a stream for entrepreneurs. And the international entrepreneurs, if they want to come to Canada through that channel, they need to claim their family net worth, and as per requirements of the provincial government, they need to verify this claimed net worth as well as their funds accumulation. So that means you have to report your family net worth, how many bank accounts, how many real properties, what are the values, and how did you accumulate that net worth through the past 10 or maybe 20 years. And based on those information, we will perform certain review procedures. So for example, if they claim, oh, I have some bank accounts, I have some real properties, or I have some investment accounts, we will require relevant supporting documents. Some are the bank statements or real estate title deeds, valuation reports, or financial statements of their companies. And starting from there, we will perform the review, and if we have any questions or we have any comments, we will communicate with them or with their agents to make sure everything is settled before the report is issued. And that is the key differentiator. And before we issue the report, we will always communicate with our clients and the agents to make sure our understanding is correct, and if we have any concerns, those can be addressed. So there is no barrier for their further steps. And once they are satisfied with the report, we will finalize and we will submit the report to the government. And I would like to share some of the experience with you guys. So one of the key requirements from the provincial government is the applicant is required to claim completely the household net worth. That includes the principal applicant, the spouse, and any dependent children that is below 21 years old. And a typical mistake we have seen is some applicants believe, oh, it says the applicant's net worth, so they only claim the net worth under himself or herself. And this will be a big problem when they submit the net worth claim to the government. And another lesson we learned is there is some discrepancy between different sources of supporting documents. So for example, sometimes we see in one supporting document, the information is like this, but when we look at another supporting document, so for example, the bank statements, the information is quite different from the other documents, and that will cause some concerns of the government. And another one that is very typical is because most of the applicants, they own their business in their own country, and for some countries, the financial recording or the documentation system is not that mature. So lots of applicants, they messed up their personal assets and their business assets. So for example, they may use their personal bank accounts for their business. So when they look at their bank statements or they look at their bank balances, even though the bank balance is pretty huge, that contains some money belongs to their company. So when they claim their net worth on their claim form, they claim one side in their personal bank accounts. However, when they present or when they claim their business net worth, they also include that balance in their business value. So there is some double counting. So what we did is, when we talk to those clients, we ask them to distinguish which bank account is used by a personal or by a family, and which bank account is used by a business. If there's some overlap, we need to make sure you don't overstate your net worth.
Thank you very much, Roy, and thank you everybody for being here and for inviting us here. Family office is a fairly new concept in Canada. It's been around for a long time, but not very public. Basically what it is, and it's been around for hundreds of years in the US and in Europe and Asia, is taking care of a family who has significant wealth in separate and apart from their business. What most people, sort of think of, like the Rockefellers or somebody like that, or in Canada, the Thompson family, who have their own core people that look after them. What most entrepreneurs have, though, is the people inside of their business to take care of their personal things, too. That usually isn't a good idea because, number one, the people inside the business are good at the business part, usually don't have a lot of knowledge on dealing with personal items for a family. Number two, they're also distracted because if someone inside the business, your bookkeeper, your CFO, your accountant, your internal lawyer is dealing with, your own personal real estate things or your own personal estate planning, they're distracted and they're not making money in the business. They're effectively a cost center for you personally, so that isn't, again, an effective use of resources. So what we do at MNP is we extract those personal things from what's called an embedded family office, which is what you have in your own business. So as Roy kindly mentioned earlier, once you and your families are here, you need taken care of in a very different way than, you know, as you're on your way, whether you're here permanently or not. So the few different things that are really key are making sure that you have appropriate planning for here, whether it's financial planning to make sure that, you know, again, part of what Roy and his team do as far as part of the verification, as far as the net worth statement, all those sorts of things, is to make sure you have adequate insurance. Should something happen to you, what happens to your business? If you have a home, or, you know, let's say someone is very asset rich, for example, they have real estate, they have industrial, commercial spaces, or an operating business. If something happens to you, you know, when, it's just a matter of when something happens to you, at that time, do you have liquidity? Or, you know, to be able to pay a tax bill, to be able to pay, you know, whatever liabilities there are, or do you all of a sudden have to have a fire sale of your assets? So making sure that things are adequately planned and you know what your liabilities are when someone passes away. The key, and, you know, when you have investments currently, okay, yeah, good, thank you. When you have investments, do you have the appropriate understanding of what your investments are? You go to your stockbroker, you go to your bank, and they say you've got this, you've got that. Do you understand, you know, what the risks are, what's going on in there, what do you actually have versus what you may want? So understanding your risk profile, your tolerances, what your time horizons are, things of that nature. Family governance, that's basically decision making. So how do you as a family, when you have a family business, for example, or, you know, when something happens, when the primary business owner suddenly passes away and there's no plan, who's going to make the decisions? I was actually involved in a business where my business partner passed away suddenly, and according to no plan whatsoever, his son stepped in, and the whole thing went sideways. So it was a very real situation. We had a half of a plan. You know, the founder of the company was working towards it, but as a lot of founders of businesses do, they have a hard time letting go. So moving along and making sure that you have, even if you have, you know, a plan that's not perfect, it's better than not having a plan at all or being halfway through a plan. So that ensures that, number one, from a financial standpoint, your family and your company and your business can continue on without a lot of, without any other stress or risk involved. And again, making sure liquidity is there, having, for example, an insurance policy in place to, you know, to fund any liabilities, to buy out other shareholders if there is anybody, or to ensure that, you know, if you are the principal operator of your business, who's going to step into your shoes and actually run your business? So again, making sure that there's adequate resources there to take care of that. And so where does a family office come into that? That is having that one, to use a construction analogy, general contractor. You're still going to have all your other professionals. The family office doesn't replace your professionals. You still need your lawyer, you still need your accountant, you still need your insurance person, you still need your investment person. But having that general contractor, you still need a plumber, you still need a, you know, a roofer, you still need a framing, all those sorts of things, electricians, all of that. But somebody has to be there to see that picture from a 30,000-foot view and make sure that all the puzzle pieces fit together. And that's what a family office does. And we'd be happy, to answer any questions that you may have.
So I don't know. The first question is, does it matter if we incorporate our company in a big or a small city? Doesn't make sense.
Do you, whether you incorporate in general or where you incorporate?
I don't know. That was the
one of the challenges, I think, as well with a lot of entrepreneurs is that you find a lot of, in smaller cities, you find a lot of general practitioners. So you have someone who does your real estate conveyancing, does your incorporation, does your will, and does all sorts of, you know, does everything under one roof. In a small town, finding a specialist is difficult, but often when things get more complicated, you want to go to a larger city to find a professional. If you have a complicated family, a complicated estate plan, you know, the other piece too is often people in small towns don't like using the people in those small towns because then everybody knows your business, right? It's, you know, often people who are successful in their businesses don't want anyone else in town to know, you know, what they're doing, how much they've got, all those sorts of things. So, but, you know, traveling to a larger town to get a specific advice can also be a lot more expensive. So it really depends on what you need when you need it, but asking the right questions is the most important thing.
Yeah, the great thing is at MNP we have lots of offices in medium or small communities. So for example, in BC we have about 25 offices in Lower Mainland and also on the island and in the interior areas.
And we all talk to each other on a regular basis. So if there's somebody in a smaller town that needs some big town assistance, then we're there to provide it.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. For the family office services, a lot of things that you touch base on lies with the accountant, and the other ones lies within the lawyer's responsibilities, and sometimes a combination of the both. So when we get engaged with MMP, do we get the whole package? How does that really work? Because you talked about the outcomes and results, but I was a little confused about the engagement itself.
I didn't talk about the process. Thank you. Great question. So again, it depends, because who is your existing accountant and who is your existing lawyer? So if M&P is already your existing accountant, then we coordinate that. We aren't a law firm and we don't practice law. We know about it. We can identify issues, and we speak the language, because often, lawyers will be very technical, accountants can be very technical, for our colleagues over at DMCL with their earlier tax discussion. But then there are other partners who can speak a lot more, plainly about issues and challenges, and then also have the technical conversations with the respective subject matter experts. So then having, and again, it really depends on who you have and who you want to keep using. So we're happy to work with any other firms, legal, tax, whatever it is. We're, in that respect, open architecture. Would we prefer you use M&P for your tax work too? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean I won't talk to your other specialist either.
Thank you so very much for useful information. So let me conclude by thanking you all for your time and your valuable insight. We look forward to welcoming you again at our immigration conference in 2023. And